So I don't know about you, but I feel like I've already learned some things and been inspired by Michelle, especially talking about, I love how she's keeping herself up to date on things that are changing in the world because she sees how it's going to impact the way people behave. And I like so much how Tim and his organization embraced their mistakes to be able to transform. So let's give them another round of applause for that. Just very quickly, a little bit about me. As was said, as Richard told you, I've been here for 4.5 years in the Philippines, and I actually moved my American family here. So I'm not actually married to a Filipina. But I moved here because I saw the economy, and I saw the vibrance, and I saw the people. And I stayed here because I have a passion for helping the Philippines take business to the next level, and particularly with people. I really love to help people get on a better path of self-teaching. If I could sum up what I love to do with businesses, is that I help business founders and leaders to make decisions that increase revenue and reduce risk. engageSPARK is a very interesting company. I didn't start it, but I met the founder, Ravi, who's here. I met him in Cebu. Both of us had been living there for about the same amount of time, which is now more than 4 years. Ravi had started this company. We have very similar passions and values when it comes to using business to solve world problems. And he had created engageSPARK actually for the purpose of solving the problem of poverty. So engageSPARK is a platform that helps NGOs to interact with the people that they're helping across the world. And when I met Ravi, I found out that this amazing social enterprise that had this vision that I loved so much really needed help to figure out how to make it sustainable so that the company would be here to serve NGOs 5 and 10 years down the road. And to do that, we needed to serve corporations as well. So over the last year and a half, we've actually been engaging with and finding solutions. We've built a suite of solutions that help companies who do volume recruiting, especially, anyone who does quite a bit of hiring, to automate parts of that over multiple channels. So applicant might go through a journey between an SMS, a Facebook Messenger automated conversation, and we can help alleviate a lot of the time-wasted parts of recruitment. So this is a large part of our focus now. All right, so here are a few of our clients, just quickly, a few of our investors, and some places that we've been mentioned. So what am I going to talk about today? Well, I'm going to talk about something that you might think would be potentially boring, but it's actually about data privacy regulation and some things that are changing around the world, including here, and how it would affect HR. Maybe, and I surveyed the audience a little bit this morning, and a few of you that I talked to, I can see that a lot of your companies have probably already started making changes to your processes and doing things differently because of this regulation. My goal here today is, I hope, because I've been following data privacy regulation changes for about a year now, and between GDPR in the UK and the Data Privacy Act here in the Philippines, I'm just hoping that maybe I can share something with you today that maybe you didn't know and that might help you see an area of your business that you can improve. Okay? So we'll cover just a few areas. One is Data Privacy Act versus GDPR. So this is the Philippines versus UK, kind of just a fast matchup. Why HR might be higher risk than you think, key areas of risk, and then HR and recruiting separately, what areas you might want to look at that could be places that you might want to change, and then a little bit of recommended action to reduce risk. And I'll also show you a little bit about something we have created that solves one of these problems, okay? All right, this clicker seems to not work, so if you could, I've got a lot of one after another. All right, so just so you know why this legislation actually exists, the reason really at its core is because our ability as companies and organizations to collect and process and store data about individuals has grown exponentially over the last decade or so, right? But the individual has not really been protected or given enough power to decide how their data is used and where it goes, right? So this legislation was designed to give us as individuals more power and control over and transparency over how our data is used and where it goes. The purpose is exactly that, to enhance that privacy protection. PII stands for personally identifiable information, any information that could be used to figure out who you are, right? And the implications of this regulation is that companies found to be misusing data. Have you guys heard of Cambridge Analytica? Right? Companies found to be misusing data have stiff penalties. And in the UK, or any company that has presence in the UK or sells goods and services to UK citizens, can be fined up to 4% of annual revenue, or 20 million euros, whichever is more. So it's pretty serious that we know what we're dealing with. And the Philippines, if you could go back. Philippines penalties for not complying with Data Privacy Act. There's actual jail time potential. That's why I put that earlier. And the financial penalties can be significant. Okay. But my purpose of putting this up is that if you did analyze all of these different categories of how the regulation was created, they're very similar. You can see that the Philippines basically took the GDPR document and pretty much made it simpler English, but it's the same. So the regulations are quite similar. You can see from personal data how we control it, the purpose, limitation. I'm going to go through some of these things. All right, so why do I say that HR may be higher risk than you think? So HR data, much more than customer data, means we're collecting and storing and processing information about people that's much more sensitive, because we know things about their health records. We know quite a bit about the people who work for us, right? So that data is higher risk, and it carries higher penalties if we don't do it right. We also have employees inside of our company who know our processes, and they know if we're not compliant. And if they leave and they're not happy, they're much higher risk to file a complaint than a customer. A customer may find out that their rights were violated. Are they really going to go through the trouble to file a complaint with the National Privacy Commission? Maybe not. But a disgruntled employee may have a lot more reason to do that. And then we have in recruitment the fact that we are actually processing such large volumes, especially the companies who do a lot of hiring, that data is pretty hard to deal with. It's pretty hard to make sure that we're following regulations. Through my research, a few key areas of burden and or risk that I've identified that might help you. One is that employers, especially if your company at all exists in the UK, or I'm sorry, in Europe at all, employers must comply with a lot of different jurisdictional labor laws. So the GDPR is not the only thing you need to know. You need to know where are you operating, where do you have employees, and what are those laws. And in some places, employee consent is not enough. Sensitive data carries more strict penalties, as I mentioned earlier, and the monetary exposure for improperly handling HR data is a lot higher than if you mishandle customer data, depending, okay? So here are a few HR practices that might need to be changed. As I said, I think some of you have already started and maybe completed quite a few of these. But number one, most challenging might be that we now have to acquire consent for specific uses. So you can't just assume that your employee has given you consent for everything you ever need to do. So maybe if you need to send data to the HMO provider, you might actually have to get specific written signed consent for that use of their data, right? And probably one of the more laborious parts is the fact that employees have the right to know. So you're supposed to inform them about how their data is being used, which is possibly something we haven't been doing so proactively. We have to be more careful about managing internal access. Who has access? Where do they have access? This is probably your IT and your data privacy officer help you with this. You as an HR head or leader or team are probably going to need to work with that DPO much more often to know so they can educate you. And we have rules now about how long we can keep data. So you may have to purge databases of applicants, employees who left your company, et cetera. Also, there's probably some work to do when it comes to educating your team and them knowing the new processes, because of course they're interacting with this employee and applicant data all the time, and if they don't know the new reasons why they have to change what they do, they could be causing you problems you don't even know about. Okay? So in recruiting, a couple of the specific areas where you might look at. One is, are we contacting applicants? They gave us their CV, we kept it, and now we're contacting them for a different job description that may not be data privacy compliant. How long do we keep CVs or resumes? And then how do we exchange data back and forth? How do we send data or how do we receive data from third party, perhaps if you outsource some of your recruiting? And that needs maybe a data sharing agreement, and so it needs to be looked at, those processes. We also are obligated under this regulation that we should only be collecting the data that's necessary for what you're doing. So I think in recruiting there has possibly been a history of over-collecting information that we don't actually need, and that could get you in trouble. Now here's one that I actually recognized about a year ago, because we do work with people in HR and recruiting. And as I was looking at the processes and I was looking at data privacy regulations, the DPA in the Philippines coming into effect hardcore like last September, right? And I was looking at the recruitment processes that I see with our clients. And one area that I noticed that looked to me like it may not be compliant was how we get employee referrals. Have you guys seen this in your company? I think from surveying most of the people I talk to in companies in the Philippines, this is still the way it's going. So if this is what you're doing, don't feel bad, because you wouldn't have changed it yet. But are your employees giving the names and numbers of their friends to your company so that you can contact them about a job? It's the standard, right? So employee referrals are typically, most companies would say this is where we get our best employees, they stay the longest, so it's a great channel for finding applicants. And it doesn't even seem like something we would think about, but if we go to the employees, we ask them to write down a list of the names and numbers. Can you go back one? If you ask your employees to write down the names and numbers of their friends, and you start contacting them, even if their friends have actually given the employee consent, there's no way you can document that. And so somebody could complain later and file a complaint with the NPC saying, this company's been contacting me about a job, I never asked for this, I didn't have interest, I never gave them consent to have my phone number and my name to contact me, right? So what do we do? How do we use the employee referral program to its fullest and maybe even make it better without being non-compliant? Right, so I haven't solved a lot of your data privacy compliant issues yet, but I think we may have solved this one. So if you don't mind, I'll kind of walk you through a story of how we came up with a way to get around to make this one go away. Next slide. All right, so just walking you through a story. Let's say your company, assuming you were in the business where you had clients that ask you to, whether you're a shared service company where people have been moved now to the Philippines, or if you've gotten a new client, maybe as a BPO, and you have to fill seats. And you've got a requirement of 2,000 new agents as soon as possible, okay? Pretty challenging. So the usual solution might be, part of the solution would be, let's open up all the sourcing channels, and let's have a referral hike up, which means let's go talk to the employees, get as many names and numbers as we can, and we'll start contacting them, right? You probably are violating this Data Privacy Act, right? Because consent is necessary before any organization can lawfully collect and process personal data. But just by taking the name and the phone number from your employee, it's already broken. So what do we do? Next slide. Because we are a automation company, what we do is we look at business processes. We try to find areas where companies are either inefficient or perhaps in this case not compliant, and they have to change something. And we try to take some of that work away by automating it, right? So we created a new solution that we don't think anybody's ever done before, where instead of the employee giving you the names and numbers of their friends, you now automatically, an employee is getting a text message every week or maybe every 2 weeks reminding them, hey, we really need this type of person. Maybe it's a doctor. We're talking to a major hospital here in Manila about helping them find doctors and nurses. So maybe the doctors or the nurses need to refer their friends that they know from school, right, from college. And so they would be reminded, hey, we really need doctors with this specialty, or we really need nurses with this specialty. Who may you know that you could invite? And the next message they get is an invitation written already for them. And so they can just forward this invitation to their friends and their friend will get this invitation that says, hi, as you know, I work for this hospital and I love it here, our culture's great, we really need somebody with your specialty, and because I know you, I think you might be open, I would love for you to work with us, if you are willing to apply. Just click on this link. And from the SMS, it takes them to Messenger. There's an automated conversation there, and we say, before we gather their name and their phone number, we tell them, by giving us your name and your phone number, you're giving the company consent to contact you about this job. And then, of course, we can automatically track who referred. The recruitment team gets notified that you have a new opt-in lead. Here's who referred them. So John referred Mary. Contact Mary, here's her number, like that. And so now you've solved the problem not only of a lot of admin work, having to go collect all those names, people who weren't even interested, but you've also become compliant because every single lead that you get from your employee referrals is already consent and opt-in, right? So this is just something that we created, and we hope that we can help a lot of companies here not have to figure this out on their own, because we already have something that's turnkey that we can put into place very quickly. All right, so to wrap up, information about what I would suggest, and again, this is pretty big picture and broad, right? You have to obviously figure out specifically what your company needs. But number one, I would just recommend, kind of like Michelle's attitude toward keeping up to speed with things, is that these things will affect the way people behave, right? As the individuals, as citizens know their rights, they're going to change behavior. You're going to start seeing actual complaints about breaches of this. So know your data privacy officer in your company, and know your processing and storage policies, and possibly get familiar. It only took me an hour to brush up on the DPA. It's not that long of a document. You can read it. Know your employee rights, because that's what they're going to find out, and then you'll understand it from their perspective, why we need to protect them, right? And then identify processes that you see risk in, create a plan. Gather and store consent. This is probably one of the biggest process changes I think we have to do, is figure out where in your processes you need specific consent, and you have to get that signed from them and store it. Creating team-wide awareness training. Maybe this is a selfish plug, but select partners that have already solved problems for you, if you can, to reduce risk, so that you have less work to do. And continue learning, because this is just the beginning. I think data privacy, actually the GDPR goes into effect May 25, so it's not actually 100% in effect yet, but the Philippines DPA already is. We did this ahead of the UK, so we should give ourselves a big pat on the back, all right? If you guys wouldn't mind, I would love to invite you to experience what this feels like. If you would grab your phones, if you can just go to this link. It's engageSPARK.com/demos/refer. Okay, and there is a very simple form. You're just going to put in a phone number, your number, and it's going to just walk you through the experience of what the applicant would feel, the employee actually would feel, and then the applicant. So you'll see what that's like. And don't worry, we'll get your consent first before you do this. It'll ask you for it, and we won't use your information for any other purpose, only this one. All right, so I hope that this information's been somehow useful to all of you in some way. I hope. That's a lot to hope for, but and I would just say, my passion about helping companies in the Philippines, and the Philippines as a business community, to go to the next level. I'm looking forward to working with you on doing that, but especially on investing more and more in our people, because that's how we're going to get there. Thank you.